the data that AI are trained on really matters most of all. Anything that's bigoted needs to be sanitized from the data, and just, pulling raw data from Reddit and Twitter and other social medias, oh man, it's so dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think until it has its own point of view, there is an issue about the people who are then coding it. So it isn't autonomous yet. So until it's autonomous, then I suppose the question is, where does that agency come from? So so what do you think about OpenAI, for example, and how they're dealing with questions of objectivity and training bias?
Oh man. Yeah.
I know these are very difficult questions that we're shooting at you. No need to give some kind of fully correct
answer. No, I appreciate it. I think these are the type of questions that we need to talk about. And, a lot of the AI talk is very surface level. So I appreciate these deeper questions. Yeah. I mean, it's clear that the data that AI are trained on really matters most of all. The algorithms, we've kind of established what works there. And even for simpler models, if you have amazing data, you're going to get great results. So, and we've seen so many historic examples of when unbiased data, or just data that hasn't been properly sanitized or whatever, is introduced to the models. That Microsoft had some Twitter bot back, I don't know how many years it was ago now, but it very quickly started having these sort of bigoted views from the data that it was trained on. I think was it trained on Twitter and Reddit data or something like that.
It's not surprising that it comes out a little bit bigoted, given the arguments you get on both platforms. But
right. But, for humans, it's really no different. The environment that we are in really shapes who we are. I mean, it's we have our own intrinsic biology, but then the environment that we're in forms us into who we are, and it's the same for AI. So we really can't be surprised that the data matters as much as it does. But yeah, I know that of course, with OpenAI, I think I've heard some people complain that they are putting their own political perspective into the data, or removing political perspectives that don't align with their own. It's a tricky one too, because as humans, we're also sort of blind to our own biases sometimes. But I mean, it kind of goes without saying that, anything that's bigoted needs to be sanitized from the data, and just, pulling raw data from Reddit and Twitter and other social medias, oh man, it's so dangerous.
Yeah, I think maybe the point of contention is that people disagree over what's bigoted and what's not. And I think that in itself is creating this debate. And I think another part of the issue is that people often look to like ChatGPT as a point of authority. So once you have AI growing and becoming this bank of knowledge, then when it has views that are biased, that can also become a little bit risky. I suppose I think OpenAI so far have done an okay job. So when I ask ChatGPT really difficult questions, even really difficult moral and political questions, it usually deals with them quite well and with quite sophisticated answers. I suppose, what do you think is now next for these LLMs or AI in general, and how do you think that might align with your own work that you're doing with AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, one of the problems that people have been talking about is that they've kind of run the well dry in terms of data, which seems crazy because the internet is massive, and you would think that there would be more than enough data to train up these LLMs. I mean, I think the LLMs are quite good at what they've been trained to do. You know, if you're working on a programming project and you're like, hey, I'm getting this error, you can copy and paste the code in there. It can debug it very quickly. But, you know, one of the problems that I've observed, and whether this is actually a problem or not, it's up for debate. But one thing I've noticed is, you know, it does great with problems that have already been established. But in terms of solving new problems that haven't been solved, you know, it's not really giving any answers that are novel per se. You know, it can do a great job of summing up the existing literature, the existing research, solving problems that have already been solved, which we might even say, hey, do we really want the AI to be making these discoveries or, you know, coming up with new ideas? Some people would say no. Some people would say, well, yeah, of course, like, because we might be able to cure diseases. You know, if you were to say, hey, come up with a cure for Parkinson's disease real quick to the AI, you know, we would love for it to say, okay, yeah, actually, if you know, modify these genes in this way, then Parkinson's goes away. But it, you know, currently can't do anything like that. I think a lot of people are interested in how they can make the process of like software development even easier with the AI, because, you know, if you were to say, hey, can you recreate Microsoft Word from start to finish, it would take a lot of back and forths with that AI to get even like the basic word processor app going. So of course, a lot of people would love to be able to just give one command and maybe a few adjustments and have it develop, you know, a full on app for you. A lot of people, you know, so I think in the business sphere, there's going to be more push, and wherever the money is, of course, that's where people want to drive the AI.
I know that the CEO of NVIDIA said that he thinks no-code coding is going to be the future. I'm not an expert, but I think that's definitely possible. And that could be something that's really cool to see because that's sort of still human-led. I think as sophisticated as AI get, as long as we have actors behind, then it's not a bad thing, right? As long as you're able to have human agency kind of sit at the back of it, then it shouldn't be such a problem. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you about, maybe so our listeners can also understand where you're coming from on this topic. Your company, Alliance AI. Yeah. I know you guys build models yourselves, but you also do loads of other things. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the work you're doing there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, probably the most relevant to what we were just talking about is I've actually been working on how to take that next step and do more of the no code coding. Now, I write code. I write in Python most of the time, but, you know, learned various languages over the years. But my thought is, how can we do this from a multi-agent approach? So basically instantiating multiple LLMs and having them basically be like a community where everyone's assigned a different role. They talk to each other and they work to solve a common goal with their own assigned expertise, and to keep that conversation going. So it's funny too, because before ChatGPT came out, I was actually working on building an AI assistant for a number of years, building upon GPT-2. So, you know, ChatGPT started with GPT 3.5. I had an approach where I took GPT-2 and then I built a number of subsystems on top of that would sort of do a lot of things. So GPT 3.5 is a single model AI assistant, where this assistant that I had built just built upon GPT-2, and it was a number of subsystem models. Like one would, correct for grammar. Another one would identify, was this a declarative statement or a question? So when ChatGPT came out, I was like, oh man, all that work,
frustrating.
Yeah, out the window. It really made me realize too, like, what am I doing? It's just my colleague and I working on a lot of these problems. We really need to build out our team. On a more business level, straightforwardly speaking, I'm working on a software for investors, specifically for the everyday person. Because what I've noticed is that, a lot of people, and there's really no reason to blame them for this, but they just don't know how to assess a stock as an investment opportunity. Things like financial statements are totally opaque to them, and you can't blame them for that. There's a lot of reason for it to be opaque. So what I have done with this software is try to take those financial statements for a company and assess the business, and then break it down for the user in a very plain English sort of way to say, hey, they've been steadily growing their free cash flow over the last 3 years, or, they have negative shareholder value, which means you might want to reconsider this because, they have more debt than equity in the company, things like that. The model will also predict which stocks are going to go up by 20% or more over the next 12 months. That's another feature of it. Another feature is that it estimates a fair value for the stock. So if the stock's going for $100, but the software estimates that based on its free cash flow, based on other factors, the stock's actually worth $120, you might have something that looks like it's on sale in front of you, right? So that's the whole point of the software, is to basically empower the everyday investor to have a better understanding of the business that underlies the stock, because the stock market is not the casino. It's not a lottery ticket. This is a partial ownership of a business. So as a partial owner, you should try to understand the business as best you can.
I think there'll be two stages when these kind of tools develop. First of all, it's obviously already successful. I've seen that you have it up and running live on your site, Freedom. So if anybody wants to check that out, we'll link it down below for anybody who wants to have a look. But my sort of concern is, once these get even better or perhaps even more widespread, I'm kind of interested to see how it's going to impact the stock market as a whole, because the stock market is kind of predicated on this information gap that people don't exactly know how things are going to move. And as it gets more sophisticated, I don't know where you see that might go. But, if these tools actually are able to perfectly predict what the fair price is, we're never going to be very far away from the fair price.
Right.
So,
No, that's a good thing to bring up. So there's this idea called the efficient market hypothesis. And a lot of people are, devotees to this hypothesis and say that, well, there's already too much information available, so that, everything is basically fairly priced, and you should just buy something like the S&P 500, and just bank on the appreciation of that over time of, roughly in the US, 10% a year for the S&P 500. That's what it's historically averaged. And I think that's great advice for the majority of people. We've seen that 90% of professional investors can't beat the S&P 500. So there's a lot of credibility to the efficient market hypothesis already. But we also see investors like Warren Buffett, Seth Klarman, who have done 20% plus, and 10% versus 20% doesn't sound like a lot on a linear scale, but when that interest compounds on itself every year, I mean, it's a humongous difference. So even if you can, beat the market by 2% or 4%, I mean, that's huge. So now if this tool becomes widespread enough, of course, it would make the market even more efficient. Hopefully, I guess people jump on it sooner rather than later so that they can take advantage of it before it does get to that sort of more efficient point. I hope I'm able to build a software that can encourage people to do that for sure.
Please welcome Cameron Hamilton.
He's a serial startup founder, an AI expert, data scientist, but most impressively, he's a successful contestant on Love is Blind.
What does it mean to you to take a leap of faith?
Throughout life, we are faced with scenarios where we must take a leap of faith. In the context of a relationship, that means being vulnerable. You risk being rejected by that other person, and that's scary.
Is love truly blind? Your company, Alliance AI.
For all of us who would love to preserve consciousness in a digital medium or back up our memories, our personality, if that's even possible.
So what do you think about OpenAI, for example, and how they're dealing with questions of objectivity?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that short clip of our episode with Cameron Hamilton. If you want to see the full episode where we get into AI, real estate, and Love is Blind, you can click right here. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep getting guests like these and keep bringing you guys interesting content. Thanks so much. See you next time.